The cafe smelled like bitter coffee grounds, melted sugar, and the faint, clean scent of the Han River air that snuck in every time the door opened. Amara Johnson, all 5'9" of her, was wiping down the chrome counter for the second time, trying to ignore the dull ache in her knees. It was midnight and she was alone. The owner, Mrs. Song, had left an hour ago, trusting Amara with the lockup procedure. A trust Amara earned through being quiet, hardworking, and crucially, a foreigner who spoke just enough Korean to get by but not enough to complain. Outside, Seoul was still humming. Not the loud, frantic buzz of London, but a deep, low thrum, like a giant machine running on efficient, disciplined power. Amara loved the city at this hour. It was when the neon lights bled together, softening the rigid angles of the skyscrapers into an impressionist blur. She was wearing a thick, oversized wool cardigan over her part-time uniform, a necessity in early autumn. Her skin, a deep mahogany, felt cool in the dry air. For 6 months since she'd moved here with her mother, her presence in Seoul had felt like a visual dissonance, like a single bold, dark stroke across a canvas painted in muted pastels. She was used to the double takes, the quick, curious glances that snapped away the moment she met them. Tonight, alone, she simply felt like herself. She finished the counter, her mind already on the sketchbook waiting in her backpack. She'd been trying to capture the geometry of the Gangnam intersection near the embassy, all sharp lines and rushing movement, but hadn't been able to make it feel alive. She moved toward the back, where the refuse bins waited next to the staff entrance. The Café Seoul, was tucked down a narrow, cobbled side street that ran parallel to the river. It was an area popular with older business types during the day and couples looking for quiet privacy at night. Now it was empty. Amara paused by the back door, taking a deep breath of the cold air before lifting the latch. Right then, she murmured to herself, pulling the heavy sack of trash out. She dropped it into the large green bin with a wet thud. It was as she was bending down to close the lid that she heard it. First, a shout, sharp and sudden, cut across the quiet hum of the city. It was in Korean, too fast and too harsh for her to fully process, but the tone was universal. Anger. Amara froze, her hand hovering over the bin lid. This wasn't the sound of drunken salarymen. This felt different, tighter. Then came the sound of breaking glass. A heavy, expensive kind of shatter, followed by a grunt of pain. Her heart leaped into her throat, a frantic, frantic bird. Don't look. Go back inside. Lock the door. She did the opposite. Slowly, carefully, Amara lowered herself into a crouch behind the row of industrial recycling bins. They were huge, blocky plastic containers that smelled faintly of old beer, but they provided a solid, reassuring shield. She risked a tiny peek. The side street, usually dark, was now illuminated by the harsh, cool headlights of a single car. It was a sedan, large and black, parked diagonally, blocking the narrow alley entrance. Next to it, near the brick wall, stood 3 men. They were wearing identical, expensive, dark gray suits. Not the suits of business, the suits of uniformity. One of the men was pressed up against the wall, head down, holding his wrist. The other 2 were focused on a 4th figure standing slightly apart, framed by the car's headlamps. He was taller than the rest, maybe a few years older than Amara, but radiated an unnerving stillness. His dark hair was slicked back, accentuating the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. He was holding something that glinted briefly, a heavy object, a brass knuckle perhaps, and the knuckles of his right hand were smeared with something dark that Amara knew, instinctively, was blood. He spoke in Korean, a low, level voice, a stark contrast to the shouting she'd heard moments before. Amara's brain translated on a delay. Don't ever do that again. The threat wasn't shouted. It was delivered with the calm precision of a surgeon making an incision. The man against the wall didn't argue. He just nodded, breathless. The men were quiet now, the silence heavy and complete, broken only by the distant whoosh of traffic. Amara felt a creeping, icy chill travel up her spine. This wasn't a fight. This was a sentence being passed. She should have ducked down lower. She should have closed her eyes and waited for the sound of the car door slamming. But the sheer intensity of the scene, the dark suits, the pools of light, the casual violence, held her frozen. She was an artist, and this was an impossible, terrible composition. The tall man, the one with the blood on his knuckles, shifted his weight. His gaze, detached and cold, swept over the alley. And then, impossibly, horrifyingly, his eyes stopped. They met hers. Amara's breath hitched, a tiny, ragged gasp she immediately choked down. Time stretched, thick and suffocating. She could hear nothing now but the frantic, desperate drumming of her own pulse inside her ears. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they held no surprise, only a sudden, profound annoyance. She wasn't an obstacle or a witness. She was a problem, a loose end that had just appeared. He didn't move. He didn't shift his body or give any other indication to the men around him. He simply stared, assessing. Amara, trapped, could only stare back. She saw the details now. The expensive silk of his tie, the meticulous way his hair was styled, the absolute, terrifying calm in his expression despite the dark fluid staining his hand. She saw the quick, analytical survey he took of her. The dark skin, the bright, frightened eyes, the cheap cotton cafe uniform. He clocked her as foreign, as young, and as vulnerable. For a moment, she was absolutely certain he was going to tell his men to drag her out, to silence her. She braced, her hands digging into the concrete behind her, ready to bolt. Then the smallest of changes. His left eyelid dipped down, not a blink, but a minute, almost invisible gesture. It was a movement that told her, leave. It was an order, not a plea. A dismissal, not a threat. He broke the eye contact first, turning his attention back to the men, his posture one of complete control. The moment was over, vanishing like mist. Amara's body finally unlocked. She lowered her head, not bothering to look again, and scrambled backward toward the open staff door on silent, shaking legs. She slipped inside, her back hitting the cool metal frame with a soft thud. She didn't stop until she was leaning against the counter, hands braced on the stainless steel, fighting for air. The sound of car doors, heavy, expensive car doors, slamming shut echoed down the alley. The engine roared, powerful and deep, and the black sedan sped away, leaving the side street in sudden, blessed darkness. Amara stayed there for 5 full minutes, until her heart rate settled below a panic attack. The only illumination was the soft yellow glow of the interior lights. A diplomat's daughter. That's what her mother called her. A good girl, who did her homework, helped her mother navigate life in a foreign country, and spent her money on art supplies. She had never been near anything remotely criminal, let alone this level of controlled, efficient violence. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing the image to disappear. The man's face. The blood. The way his eyes had locked onto hers. She was English. She was only here for her mother's posting. She had no connection to any of this. She just happened to be taking out the rubbish at the exact wrong moment. Amara went through the rest of the lockup procedure mechanically. She checked the registers, turned off the lights, and set the alarm. Her hands were still trembling as she slid the key into the main lock and turned it. Standing outside the cafe, with the iron gate pulled shut behind her, she felt utterly exposed. The Seoul air that had felt clean and familiar moments ago now felt predatory. She didn't dare walk back down the alley. She turned left toward the main road, walking with a quick, determined stride. She needed the anonymity of the subway, the noise and bustle of people. On the subway, she sat huddled in her seat, backpack clutched to her chest. She stared at her reflection in the dark glass, studying the curve of her cheek, the braid that was starting to come loose. She was 17, dressed in a faded cardigan and jeans, carrying an expensive diploma for a mother who worked for the British Embassy. The man in the suit hadn't looked like a criminal. He looked like an heir. He carried the authority of someone who didn't fear consequences. She opened her backpack, pulling out her sketchbook. It was a distraction, a shield. But when she flipped to a clean page, her fingers refused to hold the charcoal steady. Instead of the geometrical intersection she'd planned, a single, heavy line appeared on the paper. It was the sharp, hard line of a man's jaw, followed by the dark, empty space of his eyes. He had commanded her to leave. He had chosen not to silence her. Was that mercy? Or was it just a calculation? Did he truly believe she could forget what she saw? Amara closed the book with a snap, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of the secret pressing against her ribs. She was alone in a foreign city, caught between 2 worlds, and now she had seen something that linked her life, innocently, irrevocably, to the one man who embodied its greatest danger. She got off the subway near her apartment, the neon lights of the city offering no comfort. She walked home, looking over her shoulder at every sound. Inside her quiet, spacious apartment, her mother was already asleep. Amara went into her room, pulled her thick blanket up to her chin, and tried to focus on the soft, familiar sounds of London streaming through her headphones. It didn't work. The smell of cold air and expensive leather, the crack of glass, and the cold, unyielding look in the man's eyes, Ji-Hoon Park, were all that remained. She didn't sleep that night. She just lay there, waiting for the dawn to break over a city that suddenly felt 1,000 times larger and 1,000 times more threatening. The Monday morning air in the Johnson apartment was heavy with the scent of roasted green tea and diplomatic caution. Amara had gotten 2 hours of sleep max. Her mother, Mrs. Johnson, a sharp, composed woman with a career in international relations that demanded constant vigilance, noticed immediately. "You look like you wrestled a badger, Amara," her mother said, setting down a ceramic mug. Her Korean was fluent, her mannerisms perfectly adapted to her Seoul posting. Amara tried to muster a casual shrug. "Just a rough night. Too much caffeine at the cafe." Mrs. Johnson's eyes narrowed slightly, missing nothing. "You know I didn't send you all the way here to fall behind. And you certainly didn't come here to start trouble." "No trouble, Mum," Amara said quickly, perhaps too quickly. She imagined trying to explain to her mother that she had witnessed a mob hit, or something very close to it, by the heir to a major South Korean syndicate. The explanation would either result in immediate repatriation to London or a frantic call to the British ambassador. Neither was an appealing option. She finished her rice and kimchi quickly, her stomach tight with anxiety. The logic she had constructed in the dark of her room was simple. Forget it happened. She hadn't seen faces clearly, only shadows and suits. She was a ghost who saw a ghost. Seoul International High School was an imposing, modern structure of steel and glass, situated in the wealthiest district of Gangnam. It was a place designed for the children of ambassadors, CEOs, and political power players. Amara, with her London accent and the rich darkness of her skin, already drew more attention than she wanted. She just wanted to be invisible. She walked through the grand, echoing hall, her backpack feeling heavier than usual. She managed to hold the tension at bay, focusing on the comforting routine. The clean scent of the polished floors, the low hum of student chatter, the specific angle of the morning sun hitting the huge glass windows. She reached her homeroom, Class 3A, a group that was generally quiet, academically driven, and relentlessly competitive. Amara slid into her usual seat near the back, pulling out her binder. She had just managed to find a moment of artificial calm when the classroom door opened and 2 students rushed in, whispering feverishly. "Did you see him? I heard he transferred back from the private tutoring program. His father is the Chairman Park, though. Why would he need school?" Amara barely registered the gossip. She was staring down at her notes, trying to decipher a complex history reading. Then the murmuring died. The silence that fell over the elite classroom wasn't respectful. It was a sudden, terrified void. Amara looked up, her pencil frozen midair. He was standing in the doorway. The man from the alley. Ji-Hoon Park. He was wearing the school's uniform, a tailored navy blazer, pressed slacks, and a pristine white shirt. But it looked utterly out of place, like a disguise poorly worn. He didn't look like a student. He looked like a CEO in mandatory casual wear. The dark hair she had seen slicked back with rain and blood was neatly styled, his posture rigid and formal. His face, which had been set in cold rage on Friday night, was now perfectly neutral, a mask of bored, untouchable entitlement. He glanced around the classroom slowly, his eyes passing over the nervous students. They were all avoiding his gaze, pretending to be deeply absorbed in textbooks or smartphones. And then his eyes landed on Amara. It wasn't a double take or a look of surprise. It was a flicker of profound, cold recognition. He didn't betray a single nerve, but in that moment Amara knew. He remembered her completely. He hadn't forgotten the foreign girl hiding behind the bins. He didn't move toward the teacher. He didn't introduce himself. Ji-Hoon simply walked to the only empty desk in the classroom, the one next to the window, 3 rows ahead of Amara, and settled into the seat as if he owned the room, the school, and the ground it stood on. The homeroom teacher, Mr. Kim, cleared his throat, his face pale. "Ah, students. We have a new student joining us today. This is Park Ji-Hoon." Mr. Kim didn't offer any effusive welcome, nor did he ask Ji-Hoon to stand or speak. He seemed terrified of disturbing him. "Please treat him with respect. Now, open your history books." Amara felt a wave of dizzying nausea. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a terrifying entanglement. She wasn't just a witness who saw him one time. She was now trapped in a confined space with him for 8 hours a day. The morning dragged on, each minute an eternity. Amara kept her head down, trying to make herself microscopically small. She tracked his movements through the periphery of her vision. The precise way he flipped a page, the steady grip he had on his pen. He wasn't taking notes, he was simply observing. When the bell rang for the 10-minute break, the other students rushed out, but a large perimeter remained around Ji-Hoon's desk. No one dared approach him. Amara started packing her bag slowly, her movements exaggeratedly casual. Just leave. Just walk away. She didn't get the chance. Ji-Hoon rose, his movements smooth and economical. He walked directly toward her desk, stopping so close the scent of his cologne, expensive, subtle, and cold, reached her. He didn't lean in, he didn't need to. He spoke in English, his voice a low, precise baritone that cut through the remaining classroom noise. The choice of language was strategic, a clear signal that the conversation was just for her. Amara Johnson, London transfer student. Mother works at the British Embassy. His knowledge of her was instant and total. He'd done his homework. The thought sent a fresh jolt of fear through her. He rested his hand lightly on the edge of her desk. His knuckles were clean now, the skin unmarked. He lowered his head just enough for their eyes to meet. You didn't see anything that night. You weren't there. You remember nothing but the cold. Keep it that way. The final phrase was a soft, dangerous command. He didn't sound angry or desperate. He sounded like a man stating an undeniable fact of the universe. Amara felt the heat rise on her face. Her fear was quickly being replaced by a stubborn, rebellious anger. He had invaded her space, tracked her down, and was now issuing threats with the casualness of ordering coffee. She clenched her jaw. She didn't look away. "And if I don't?" she whispered back, her voice shaking slightly but holding steady. His mouth, the beautiful, severe line of his mouth, curved into the faintest, darkest smile. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of someone anticipating an inconvenience. "Then you'll find that Seoul is a much smaller city than you thought, Amara. And the shadows are far deeper." He straightened up, his eyes holding hers for one last, searing moment before he walked past her and disappeared through the doorway. Amara skipped lunch, seeking refuge in the empty, sunlit art studio. It was her sanctuary, a place where the rules of her life, fitting in, maintaining appearances, were suspended. She sat on a stool by the window, not sketching, but staring out at the expansive view of the city. The city looked different now. Where she had once seen architectural wonder, she now saw the layers of concrete that hid the violence. She finally picked up a pencil, her hand moving tentatively. She didn't draw Ji-Hoon's face. She drew the geometry of the encounter. The hard line of the car, the broken angle of the glass, the deep, impenetrable blackness of the suit. She drew the space between her hiding place and the violence, the thin line she had unknowingly crossed. Her heart was still beating a rapid rhythm, but the fear had changed its nature. It wasn't the blind terror of what happened that night. It was a focused, almost clinical fear, the awareness of an imminent, known threat. He hadn't made her disappear. He had gone to the trouble of transferring to her high school, which meant he didn't just want to silence her. He wanted to control her. The puzzle of it was beginning to supersede the panic. Why here? If he was so powerful, why not just send someone? Why put himself at risk in a public school? Because if something happens to you, I'll have to clean it up. The thought, though not his words, echoed his cold, flat authority. He was minimizing his risks, treating her like a volatile, necessary variable in his equation. A small, insidious spark of curiosity ignited in her chest, burning away some of the cold fear. He saw her, he knew her name, and he had come to her. She looked down at her sketch, a dark, heavy composition. She added one final detail: 2 tiny, almost imperceptible dots of white at the center of the dark mass. Eyes. She realized that the city she was drawing was no longer the soul of her diplomat mother. It was his city, and she was now a reluctant, terrified observer within it. The final bell rang, shattering the studio's peace. Amara packed her supplies, the weight of the day pressing down on her. The warning was clear. The threat was real, and the most dangerous man in her life was now her classmate. She had to walk past his desk to leave the classroom. When she did, she saw he had left behind his textbook, an advanced economics text, and lying next to it, perfectly aligned, was a single, pristine white camellia flower. A common symbol in Korea, she knew, for waiting or longing. But the way he had left it, the deliberate placement, felt like something else entirely. It felt like a deliberate, artistic form of domination. Amara paused, her breath catching. She did not touch the flower. She walked out of the classroom, out of the building, and into the growing evening shadows of Seoul, knowing that the confrontation had only just begun. The appearance of Ji-Hoon in her class had effectively shattered Amara's ability to retreat into her previous life. Now, every casual glance felt like surveillance, every unfamiliar face in the hallway a potential threat. The sense of security in Seoul, which she had grown to rely on, began to unravel on Wednesday afternoon. Amara was at her locker, trying to juggle a stack of textbooks and her bulky art folio. The combination lock felt slippery under her fingers. When the door finally swung open, a piece of paper fell to the floor. It wasn't a school memo or a note from a classmate. It was a strip of pristine white stationery folded once. Amara picked it up, her heart already sinking. The note was written in neat, vertical Korean calligraphy, but the characters were harsh and aggressive. Her eye scanned the language she was still learning. You should have stayed out of it. We all know you saw too much. There was no signature, just the message, chillingly clear. She looked up sharply, scanning the busy hallway. Hundreds of students were rushing past, a vibrant tapestry of blue and white uniforms. Which one of them had slipped the note in? Was it a student? Or was it one of his men, wearing the uniform as a better disguise than Ji-Hoon's? Her hand crushed the note into a tight ball. This wasn't Ji-Hoon's style. His threat had been direct and personal. This was sloppy, indirect, and designed to induce panic. This felt like the rival group the premise had mentioned.